A huge part of what makes The Incredibles such a great movie is its excellent character writing. Almost every character, no matter how big or small, does wonders at making the main hero's arc so much more impactful, all while being entertaining in their own right.
Coincidence? I think not!
Well, most of them do. There's one character in the movie where an attempt was made to give her an arc, but it kind of falls apart under scrutiny. But I never really hear anyone talk about this, which, if I had to guess, I'd say is probably just because people don't generally give it a ton of thought. I know for the longest time I certainly didn't. The character I'm referring to is Mirage, Syndrome's right-hand woman turned ally to the Incredibles.
My name is Mirage.
To be fair, Mirage's role in the story for the first half of the movie is relatively effective at building intrigue in the story. We initially see her as a mysterious woman spying on Frozone and eventually Mr. Incredible for, at the moment, unclear reasons.
They're just talking.
After witnessing them doing a bit of underground hero work, we see her again the following morning, sneaking into Mr. Incredible's workplace. This is a reasonably good way of setting up the looming threat that gets revealed later on. The fact that Mirage is investigating these two is a subtle way of letting the audience know that Mr. Incredible's secret identity has been compromised and that he's potentially in danger. And the fact that she's speaking with someone else, is investigating other heroes, and apparently reporting back to another party implies that there's a larger conspiracy at play.
Trust me, this is the one he's been looking for.
This eventually leads to Mr. Incredible finding a secret video message left by Mirage where she requests his help.
Please pay attention as this message is classified and will not be repeated.
And okay, I'm gonna have my criticisms for Mirage as a character later on in this video, but to give credit where it's due, this scene is brilliant. You might not think about it while watching, but a scene like this would be difficult to make engaging for the audience without derailing the story, and for one simple reason. The incident that Mirage is describing and requires Mr. Incredible's help with is a lie. None of what she's claiming is at stake is real and is actually just a ploy to lure Mr. Incredible to his death. So on the one hand, you want to keep your audience interested, but still have to make it so they don't feel let down when it's revealed to be fake. Like, imagine if the audience became genuinely invested in what Mirage was talking about here, and then it turned out that none of it was the actual plot. That'd be pretty disappointing. Kinda like The Last Jedi, am I right? No, I like that movie.
They were nobody.
Nice. But in a stroke of genius, while Mirage's exposition plays out, the movie actually does everything in its power to not get you invested in it. Almost all of her speech is drowned out by Mr. Incredible frantically looking for a pencil and his wife yelling at him to get his ass to the dinner table.
It's time for dinner!
1 minute!
In that entire long-winded speech, all we actually make out from it are the very basic details. Mirage supposedly works for the government, there's a robot on a rampage that they need Mr. Incredible to stop, and there's big money in it for him, which he needs since he just lost his job. It's extremely clever because as a viewer, you obviously want to understand the plot. So when you see Mr. Incredible panicking over missing huge chunks of Mirage's message, you're right there with them because you feel like you're missing something important. But at the same time, it ironically enough conveys to the audience that the opposite is true, that what's being said here isn't important and you don't have to worry about it. You could even argue that it furthers Mr. Incredible's own characterization. The fact he's been so starved of hero work that he'll eagerly accept a means of returning to it even if he doesn't fully understand what he's getting himself into.
This is Mr. Incredible. I'm in.
Throughout the remainder of the first half, Mr. Incredible interacts with Mirage a couple more times, meeting him for mission briefings, showing him hospitality for all his hard work, but at the same time also giving some hints that something more sinister is happening behind the scenes.
He's attracted to power. So am I.
Seems a bit unstable.
That eventually culminates with Mr. Incredible getting ambushed by Syndrome with the help of Mirage. Mr. Incredible escapes and discovers that Syndrome has killed dozens of superheroes with a lethal robot which he plans on unleashing in a city. But before he has a chance to put a stop to all of that, he gets caught and imprisoned by Mirage. Okay, so she's just as evil as Syndrome is. I guess that explains the underlying threat that's felt whenever she's around. Well, this is where Mirage as a character kind of starts to fall apart for me. Hey guys, check out my Patreon for access to these exclusives. Link in the description below. The next time we see Mr. Incredible, he's being held captive by Mirage and taunted by Syndrome. And it's at this point where we get this admittedly terrifying scene where Syndrome launches missiles at a plane piloted by his wife and carrying his children. It's one of the best scenes Pixar have ever made. It's stressful, it's pretty realistically dark for a family film. The score and Holly Hunter's performance create a great sense of panic.
Mayday, mayday! India Gulf 909er is buddy spiked! Abort, abort! There are children aboard! Say again, there are children aboard this... No!
It's a fantastic scene in every way. Except Mirage. This is the point where she starts to show signs of a moral compass, as we see that the realization that Syndrome is willing to kill children crosses a line for her, and we even see that she's willing to risk her own life by pushing Syndrome out of the way when Mr. Incredible tries to grab him. Okay, I guess I can see her doing that. The movie does imply that they're in a relationship, but then we see that that same level of protectiveness doesn't extend the other way.
I'll crush her.
Show me.
Mr. Incredible doesn't go through with killing her, but the fact that Syndrome made these decisions does make her question her loyalty to him, in what I can only describe as a not very well thought out way.
Valuing life is not weakness.
Oh, hey.
Disregarding it is not strength. Next time you gamble, bet your own life.
That last line is a pretty good one. It makes sense that she'd be angry with him for putting her at risk, but it's weird that this is suddenly where she grows a conscience. As we've seen, Mirage has been a willing accomplice to Syndrome's plan, which has already killed dozens of people, could kill potentially hundreds or thousands more, and has been dating a weapons dealer that we know for a fact does not care about the legality or ethics of how he gets ahead in life.
How do you think I got rich? I invented weapons.
Where is she all of a sudden getting this valuing life is not weakness and disregarding it is not strength mindset from? Okay, well, she clearly seemed disturbed by the fact that Syndrome was willing to kill children and seems to feel guilty for going along with it. So maybe that's where she draws the line? Except she already knows that Syndrome plans to unleash the Omnidroid on a heavily populated city. Does she not consider the idea that some of the people that will inevitably get hurt could also be kids? I mean, I agree that what Syndrome did was messed up, but I seriously think that Mirage needs to get off her high horse. And not only that, but there's the fact that she seemed willing to stick by Syndrome, even risking her life for him until he turned against her specifically. As if she'll only act against Syndrome's evil behavior when it negatively affects her. The rest of it, she'll at best tolerate it and at worst actively support it. What we see here isn't a redemption arc. This is the story of a selfish hypocrite who eventually does the right thing because it's suddenly in her best interest. In any case, Mirage turns on Syndrome after this, releases Mr. Incredible, and tells him that his family survived.
They're alive?
And then Mr. Incredible hugs her, which is a bit of a weird way to react. I mean, yes, he's relieved and he understands that Mirage is on his side, but she's still very much complicit in putting him and his family in that situation to begin with. It's especially weird considering she is still very much guilty of killing dozens of other heroes, at least one of them presumably being a friend of his since they were invited to his wedding.
Geezer beam.
Mirage eventually helps the Incredibles to get back to the mainland to stop Syndrome.
How do I get into the computer?
Say please.
And that's the last we ever see of her. This final moment from her appears to be an attempt by the film to cement her as being on the hero's side and redeeming herself. She's giving them a friendly smile, she doesn't face any repercussions for what she's done, and the characters never object to that. And I'm sorry, but this feels entirely unearned. Throughout the movie, Mirage has been well aware of the actions she's been taking, and only at the end does she show some very minimal signs of remorse over it. This really doesn't balance the scales against the serious crimes that she's committed. The frustrating thing is that this is something that could have potentially worked. I remember not long after Incredibles 2 came out, Brad Bird tweeted about the film's depiction of the Underminer, how the movie opened with the long-awaited battle against him, only for him to win the fight, escape, and never be seen again. He said, sometimes the bad guys get away with it, just like real life. There's a number of things you can criticize about that, though. The fact that the triumphant ending from the original movie has now been, for lack of a better word, the fact that the supposed war on peace and happiness the Underminer declared in the first movie amounted to robbing a bank and was apparently so insignificant that it never becomes relevant again.
The banks were insured. We have infrastructure in place to deal with these matters.
Or the fact that the Underminer's method of robbing the bank was to dig underground and collect the money from there, so what was even the point of ascending out of the ground and making that speech? He's just drawing unnecessary attention to himself.
Underminer, we meet again! Oh, great! Now he's on the agenda!
Kind of feel like that's on you, buddy. But ranting about arguably Pixar's most disappointing movie aside, I feel like Mirage could have been a decently executed example of what Bird was talking about here. If you just changed the part with Mr. Incredible hugging her and instead treated it as him being like, well, I still don't like you and you've done terrible things, but I guess I need your help, and then bring her up again in the limo scene with Dicker.
We've frozen all of Syndrome's assets. If he even sneezes, we'll be there with a hanky and a pair of handcuffs.
Maybe include a line from Mr. Incredible like, what about Mirage? And Dicker could say, we're looking, but we haven't found any trace of her. It looks like she might have gotten away. And then the film moves on because Mirage isn't really the focus. And you see, Brad Bird, this is how you do a bad guy got away story. I think. I don't know, what do you guys think? Am I onto something? I've done a lot of complaining in this video, but to be honest, Mirage's redemption arc isn't something that bothers me too much. It's a minor flaw concerning a minor character. And to be fair, I think I understand to an extent why this arc exists. Mirage is mainly in the movie out of necessity. She exists not to be an interesting character in her own right, but mainly as a means for Syndrome to lure Mr. Incredible into his plan, since his reveal as the villain was meant to be a surprise.
I am your biggest fan.
Buddy?
I appreciate that despite Mirage mainly serving as a plot device, there was at least an attempt to make her compelling. I just don't think it was done very well, especially compared to other minor characters who leave a much better impression.
I'm not happy, Bob. Not happy.
But hey, if this is my biggest problem with the movie, and I've only noticed it after watching it a million times, I think the movie's quality speaks for itself. Special shout out to my Patreon supporters Heather Reed and Zelda. Thank you so much for the support.